Welcome to this evening's session. My name is Becky Baxter. I'll tell you a little bit about my background in just a second, but this evening's session is really talking about the Early Years Development Programme and the need for speech and language intervention in the early years. So, my background is I am a speech and language therapist, which is kind of why I am delivering the session this evening. That's been my background now for, let me think, nearly 20 years. And I've worked throughout that time really together with a team of specialist teachers and delivering support to preschool settings locally. We also do support to school settings, but for this evening session, going out to preschools and supporting professionals working in preschools. I am currently Director of Education and Speech and Language Therapy. And I've been doing that role for about 2 years now, but I have worked with DSUK on a number of different projects for a lot longer than that. And one of the main aims of my, for me in this role is to develop services for settings that don't have a local service like the one I just mentioned. So really trying to provide some support to those areas who don't have that service to make that kind of service a little bit more equitable. So what we have done is develop our early years development programme, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that as we go through, and particularly around supporting speech and language. But just to say that if you've joined one of these sessions before, we had a session looking at the learning profile back at the beginning of last term, which was delivered by Sarah Holton, who leads our early years development programme. She's a specialist advisory teacher, and she's worked with me for a long time and delivered those services. Somebody's just
got because it says James Soden.
Oh, hello. Oh. Somebody has just put in the chat that they can't hear me. Is that everybody's experience or just that one? Oh yeah, somebody else is saying I can hear you fine. I wonder then if you haven't got your sound turned on at your end. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody else who's let me know you can hear me. I'm going to have to leave that one to you to have a look at on your individual settings. Okay, right. So, early years development programme. What we've done is we put together this kind of comprehensive package of information, guidance and ongoing support to early years settings. So settings can sign up for the year. Who is not on mute? Person there. Okay. So settings are able to sign up for the year, and that year membership runs from the date you sign up. So if you were to sign up, let's go for the 1st of February, so that makes life easy, you would have membership throughout the whole year to the end of January the following year. So you can sign up at setting can sign up at any time throughout the year. And one of the things that is important for me to remember to say is that once your setting signs up, you can add access to as many staff in your setting as you want to. So anybody working with the child, just signing on the same login and access all of this information. In developing the Early Years Development Programme, what we have tried to do is what we have done is to reach out to other experts in their field. So, for example, if we're thinking about vision, we've gone to the kind of leading expert on vision and Down syndrome and got Maggie to do a session for us on vision and put some resources together on vision. Similarly for hearing, physio, etc., etc. So they've done some pre-recorded information sessions for us. So there's loads of information to go on. If you've got a child, that's experiencing difficulties with vision or just had glasses, it would be worth going on and having a look at those sessions. There's sessions on toilet training from June and all sorts. We also have, so they're kind of longer information videos. We also have short activity videos. So you can dip in and you just go, oh, hang on, I want to hear what activities are on there in terms of supporting speech, and I'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a second. You can click on those and you can hear some of those recordings. There are resources that you can download on there, but actually when you sign up your setting, you get a resource pack, and the majority of resources are in there as a hard copy. The download is really if you want to get any extra copies. The other thing to say about the annual membership is it gives you access to ongoing support. So you can log into one of our monthly drop-in sessions and ask any questions that you have about the child that you're working with or your setting. You might have a question around moving up to a different year group, about transitions, about supporting early number. You might have some questions around speech and language. Come along to those sessions and you can ask any questions around that. Okay, so having said a little bit about that, let's talk about what's on there in terms of speech and language and focusing on speech and language strategies for the rest of this evening. When you log in, you see this kind of homepage. So we have our new CPD accredited training module. So in terms of CPD for staff, there's a module on there that really is looking at supporting staff to practically come up with targets and to think about doing some observation around how the child is getting on in the setting, and then setting those targets across all of these different areas. So speech, language, communication, early reading, early number, etc. In addition to that, you have these other 6 areas where you find information and resources. And tonight we're really focusing in on what's under this speech, language and communication section. So if you were to log into there, you get a bit of an overview about the profile of speech and language difficulties associated with Down syndrome. It's not an even profile. There are some things that the children have a particular strength with, and there are some things that children typically find more challenging. So in terms of early communication, often a real strength area for our children. In terms of vocabulary learning, words that they understand, going to be developing nicely, hopefully, throughout preschool. There'll be, if you said to them, where's the ball, the pen, mum, dad, lunch, banana, what have you, they can point to the right one, they can show you the right one, and then we know they understand those words. But being able to say those words or potentially sign those words may be more delayed, may come a lot later. So it's a bit of an uneven profile around speech and language. And when it's in speech and language, we kind of break down into communication, speech, and then thinking about that vocabulary and putting words together. And I'm going to go through these 3 in the next kind of 45 minutes. So if you were to on communication, gives you a bit of information about communication. Typically, our children with Down syndrome are really keen communicators. They want to be interacting with others. They like to have you talking to them. They like to be involved with you. They have lots of early non-verbal communication, so great eye contact often, good facial expression and tone of voice, great at communicating they're enjoying something, or when they're really not all that pleased with you without necessarily using many words. And they have this strength in social interaction, getting people to be involved with me, getting that interaction going. Can mean that they spend more time interacting with people. Obviously, on the one hand, that's great at developing those communication strengths. However, if I think about running preschool groups, you get out the toys and you think, oh, I'm going to work on fine motor skills, so I'll get out some activities that are going to work on motor skills, and then the children ignore those because they'd rather be interacting with other people in the group. So obviously I've got those things out for a reason, so we just need to be a bit aware of the children choosing that interaction versus choosing some of those other things we might have put out. So that's kind of, it is a real positive, but just to be aware of. You often see communication styles, behaviours copied. Children with Down syndrome tend to be have a strength in visual learning, good at remembering what they've seen, and have good imitation skills from quite early on. And they can, and that's good in terms of teaching, because what we tend to do is we go, oh, let me show you how to do this, and you learn through imitation, which is good. But as the children get older, it becomes a less effective learning strategy. So we want to make sure that we're moving on as well in terms of kind of things like problem solving. I seem to be having some technical issues this evening. Sorry about that. Somebody said they can't see the slides. Can other people see the slides? The other question is, will you get a copy of the slides? And you will. You will get an email in the next couple of days with a link to the slides. And oh yeah, somebody else can see. Oh, lovely. So most people seem to be able to hear me. Most people seem to be able to see the slides, which is good. Oh, somebody else has said no, I can't. I can see everything. That's interesting. Let me stop sharing and I will share again, just to see if that helps people who are struggling there. Okay. Funnily enough, I ran a session on Monday with somebody providing some technical support. We had no issues whatsoever. So I was like, yeah, be fine, be fine. What can go wrong? And there we go. Just that. Right. Play from current slide. So hopefully that may have helped to solve. As I was saying, you will get an email in the next couple of days with a link to access the handout and a link to the video. So you'll be able to go back and watch the recording, and hopefully, as I can see the slides and some people can, I think the recording will have captured the slides. If not, I'll have to do it again. So I will make sure that that's available for you. So under communication, I talked a little bit about those communication strengths of our children with Down syndrome, really wanting to be involved with everybody else. Children often will learn what gets people to interact with them. So if that's using your voice, brilliant. If that's showing a picture to somebody else, brilliant. We also sometimes learn some less effective ways. For example, the child may well knock their drink on the floor and everybody goes, oh, look how you've made a bit of a mess there. Look how everybody, let me just tidy that up. Be careful with your cup. Children will also learn, if I knock my cup on the floor, does that mean everybody turns and comes over and talks to me? Oh, yes, it does. So sometimes we can learn some other ways to get people to interact, which are less effective. So what that means, really, given that the children are keen to communicate, we know that they're going to have difficulties moving on to that spoken language. We need to be giving them communication supports right from the very beginning. So under communication, you will find in all of these sections, they are made up of these activity videos that I mentioned. So just kind of short 5-8 minute videos giving you some information on a particular topic or some strategies to use. And underneath them, there are the resources that you can either download or to give you a bit of a guide about which resource to find in your pack and to go along with the activity. So we have a video on supporting communication and the importance of supporting communication, as well as some other ways to be able to do that, really thinking about having those targets and putting those resources in place and teaching the children how to use those. We have a section on playing with others. So we know that all children will be going through playing on their own to start with and then moving on to playing with others. But that's hard if you're not great at language and if you're not great at that kind of next step exploratory play moving forward. So what we would be wanting to do is to make sure that the children have lots of opportunity, and we're teaching them how to play with others. To start with, it might just be rolling a ball to another child and they roll it back to you, or same with the cars, maybe going through a tunnel. It may be building a tower. I've got some bricks, you've got some bricks, and we're building them together. You take your turn to put one on, etc., etc. So really thinking about supporting some of that play with others. When I go into preschool settings, my favourite game to take in is that magnetic fishing. So you just got to put your fishing rod in and pick one out, but I only take one rod. So we sit around in a little circle, you choose, oh, what have you got? You've got a fish, brilliant, pass it on. So there you go, it's your turn, I'll model that language for you, or my turn, modelling some of that signing. What have you got? A crab, lovely, etc. So we're doing a bit of turn taking, a bit of interaction with the next person, passing on, nice bit of sharing, lovely. So that all comes under playing with others. Communicating with my friends. As I've said, our children are often more delayed in moving on to being able to use that spoken language. So it's really important we give them other ways to communicate. Thinking about these conversation supports. So any kind of physical resource we can put in place and teach the children how to use. Biggest one being in this preschool age is going to be visuals. Knowing that I can take a picture off of my choosing board. First, if there is a choosing board that I can access, it's at the right height and where I can get to it. And I learn if I take one of those cards over and show my friend, I'm asking them, do they want to come and play with me? And that the other children also know. One, if I come over with a picture of the water tray, I'm asking you not to go to the water tray, or equally, I might be prompting some of the other children, oh, why don't you ask Becky if she wants to play with the water tray? Go and ask her with this picture. So we kind of know lots of ways of interacting and supporting, communicating with friends. In the conversation supports talks lots more about some of those visuals. So I talked about conversation cards visuals. We also will use sentence strips where you have the same sentence written on. It might be, will you play? It could be, can I have? And you have your sentence strip, you put your picture on there. Can I have a pen or the bikes or bricks or what have you? You put your picture on there and then you practice. And to start with, of course, children aren't going to be able to read that sentence, but it is going to make sure that the adults produce the same sentence, model the same sentence every time. The children are going to hear that, get lots and lots of repetition. We'll start to understand that print, when you point to print, you say things. So it's a good prompt for having a go at saying something. And of course, if you're not very clear, you've got that nice picture and that sentence strip that you've used lots and lots and lots, so other children know what it is you're trying to say. And again, other children can use that. It talks about conversation diaries. So lots of our children will bring in books into nursery or whichever setting you're in, preschool, or maybe to the childminder. But equally, it's nice to have between families. You might take to your nan and granddad's house. And in that conversation diary would be a picture about something that the child has done with a nice simple sentence underneath. So it might say, I went swimming. And there's a picture of swimming or a leaflet that you picked up at the swimming pool, a nice little visual for me to be able to point at and people to be able to talk about. And similarly, you could then send that home. So you might put, I did some painting, and you might put a picture of the child's painting in there. Now, lots of preschool settings will use online systems like Tapestry, for example, which are good. I mean, they share information between the setting and parents, which is really, really helpful. And for well, in either setting, you can get out your tablet or phone, however you're looking at it, and have a look at it with the child. But the child doesn't have access to that without an adult being involved in getting it out and setting me up. Whereas a conversation diary, I know where that's kept in my tray, or it's kept on the table where I can reach it, and I know to go over, I can go over it and I can get it out and I can show it, got a bit more control over it. There's a video on there about not being too helpful. I know often when staff are working really closely with the child, they know the child really well, and it can be easy when children aren't great at talking to kind of maybe not give them the opportunity to talk or to make that choice, or to talk kind of giving a commentary for them almost all the time, like you're filling in the gaps. And it's about making sure that we're giving the children lots of opportunities to communicate. So it might be that they're able to say words, or it might be you saying, what would you like for snack? Do you want banana or apple? And you may well know that the child can't eat apples very well yet, but you're still making that offer to ensure that, once you've given that choice, you let the child have a turn in conversation. I'm asking you, and you can choose which one you want, and I'll then, oh, you want the banana? Lovely. We might say, oh, which banana would you like? Here's two. Which one do you want? But again, I'm stopping, giving you the chance to have a conversational turn and to make that choice and to start providing lots of opportunity for that. Things like always helping the child to put their coat on or their shoes on, and really encouraging them to ask for help. When they come over and give you their coat, try and put it on. That's what I often try and do. I go, oh, it's a bit small. And then, no, oh, it's not for me. Oh, you mean you want some help? You tell me then. So you can just kind of paints, I'm just going to put them just out of reach. You've got to ask me for them. So kind of putting in that need to communicate where the child is, obviously, and teaching those skills. And then the last one on there is about directing communication. And again, that comes back to working with friends. So it will be about directing our child with Down syndrome and how they can communicate and interact with others, but also about directing and communicating peers. For example, I remember going to a preschool and the children had the job of going to tell somebody else, did they want snack? So they come to the snack table, with only 4 people at the snack table. When they're finished, the adult says, oh, can you ask Becky if she'd like snack? And of course, my child didn't have the skills to be able to do that. So what we did put in place was that when the children went and asked anybody, they took a picture of the snack table. And now my child can go over and don't necessarily say anything clearly, but the other children know, they're asking, do I want to go for snack? And I can do that. So it's all about thinking about how we can support that two-way conversation. There's some example of communication resources. I talked about the will you play. You put your picture on there, go over with the child to start with, lots of adult support. We're going to ask, are you listening, Emma? Will you play? Let's say you play, whatever it might be, bricks. Asking you to play bricks, and again supporting the other children to do that as well. Can I have similarly some choosing cards there? I mean, there's also an I like board there, which you could use in a number of ways, but let's say you might have it on the snack table and you put out some things that the child likes, and they learn that if I point to these pictures, people will name these pictures for me, or they can say, I can say to you, what do you want to play with after break? What did you play with this morning? And you can have a point. People say, it's the sound. You're right, the sound. Can you do that sound? Yeah, lovely. So it's being able to use these kind of communication supports. You do get a set of the activity cards. However, what I would say is photos of your own environment are the best, because of course, like if we look at sand, if your sand's yellow, doesn't necessarily mean I immediately know that sand picture relates to that red tray with yellow sand in over there. So if you, the less concrete they are, the more you have to teach them. So often, particularly at this age, photos of the actual thing and the setting are most useful. But certainly they are there to get started with as a bit of a guide. Okay, so that's what you get under the communication section. If we move on to thinking about speech, when we're thinking about speech, we're really thinking about how intelligible the children are, how consistently they're able to produce sounds and words, how clearly they can say those words, how intelligible they are to others. And speech is one of the biggest challenges for children with Down syndrome. And as I said, in the preschool stage, you may well have some children who understand loads of words but aren't necessarily able to say many words, or those words that they are trying to say are not very clear at the moment. So that speech production tends to be behind where they are in terms of vocabulary understanding, that receptive vocabulary. It's not an even profile, and it's important that everybody knows that, because often if a child's not saying many words, it can be easy for others, adults and children, to think they don't understand many words. They don't understand as much as they do. That could be very different for our children with Down syndrome. In terms of speech working on developing speech, what we know is that our typically developing children are tuning into the sounds of their language right from day dot, in fact, slightly before that. And we know that there are a number of things associated with Down syndrome that are likely to make speech more tricky. For example, we have an incredibly high incidence of hearing loss. Now, that may be a diagnosed sensory neuro hearing loss, it's always there, but we have an incredibly high incidence of what we call conductive hearing loss, caused by often glue ear, or certainly wax in the ears, which impacts the majority of children with Down syndrome in the early years stages. So if you can't hear all of the sounds and words, that's going to impact on how easy it is for you to learn and store these words accurately. The children also have a specific difficulty with what we call verbal short-term memory, so remembering what they've heard and processing that. So they have difficulties hearing it, and then they have difficulties remembering it and processing it. And we know that all the other children are doing that right from the very beginning. So we really want to go right from very early on with our children with Down syndrome, working on that speech work. So if you are thinking of signing up to the Early Years Development Programme, you think, but we're not at the speech stage yet because they're not doing much talking. No, though, there's lots of stuff in here for you already. So in here we have recordings about talking to the child. I already mentioned that a little bit under communication, making sure they're getting good input, but also having the opportunity to have a bit of a go at practicing. Talks about the use of pauses, talked about turn taking, but not always providing that commentary, waiting for the child. So you might have done a bit of playing with the cars and you're just going to wait. And do they do anything to try and get your attention? Do they try and produce a sound? Do they just use their voice in babble? And you can go, oh, I heard you. Did you say da, 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 da? Because you're reinforcing, making a sound. That's a really positive thing. That gets my attention. There's a video and some cards around symbolic sounds. So those are sounds like animal sounds, that woof and the moo, transport noises, and things like wee when you go down the slide, and uh-oh if knock things over. Those are all symbolic sounds, and they tend to be short, consonant vowel, consonant structure, and they also have lots of early common sounds to be produced. So they're a good one for modelling and for encouraging with the children. We also have a video around sound cards. Now, when I talk about sound cards, these are picture cards that you introduce early on to support the child's listening and then later production of sounds. So you'd have a set of cards that represent all of the sounds of your language. We tend not to focus on the vowels too much because we don't have too much difficulty with vowels. It's the consonants that are trickier. So they would typically represent the consonants of your language. And to start with, and I would start this with babies of about 4 months of age, it's just about giving them that extra practice of hearing and learning, remembering, storing those sounds that we're producing all the time when we're talking. But when we're talking, they're really rushed together and some of them are very hard to hear. So it's just an opportunity to go, oh, look, pa, pa, pa. And the child, first of all, they just need to listen. But also I want them to have a look at my face, see any information about how that sound is produced. And then later on start to pair that sound with the card, which is interesting because often the children might not be producing many sounds or words, but if we've been doing the cards, I'll say, oh, where's, and they can find, which shows me, oh, they're learning them, they know them, even though we're not at the stage of producing them yet. That's a very important stage in terms of that learning that we know all children are doing, but our children are going to find harder. Over time, of course, we're going to move into starting to say some of these sounds like b, 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 or d, d, d. Oh, yeah, got that d. So that's sound cards. What I normally say is I choose, I'm doing a whole video here, but I should tell you, I normally say choose 8 to 10 for the week, run through them ideally in a quiet environment, but I know that that's obviously not always possible, but take a little group just to have a go at making some sounds, other children having a go at making them, modelling as well, bit of interaction going, have a bit of group work. And then at the end of that week, I'd move on to another 8 to 10, so giving them lots of chance of hearing all of the sounds of our language. The next video is all about sound books. So once you've got a sound, like the child is doing d in babble, da, 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 you think, oh, I'm going to try and teach the child that d that they're making, we use that to name these things. So I'd get some pictures, or it might be some objects in a bag that begin with that sound. So it might be duck and dog and picture of dad or daddy. And then we just get them out and say, oh, look, this one's dog. You do that one. Dog, dog, oh, brilliant. Again, lots of modelling for them, and then eventually as the children get a bit older and sounds start to develop, having a go at saying them. There's a video there about syllable marking, and again starting off with the listening and then eventually moving through to the production, so hearing some of the some words have more than one syllable. Some syllables are not very well stressed, so it's an opportunity to listen and hear, store some of these words, and then start to produce them. Activities like sorting by sound. I've got my bag and my bag. What can you hear? Choose something from the bag. All of these things are about teaching the children. They're not about the children being able to go, oh yeah, I know all these sounds, I'll just make them all. I mean, ideally, we're going to get there in the end, but it's not going to be unlikely to be in the preschool period. But all of that learning and input is important before we get to that production stage. So I'm not expecting them to go, oh yes, ball begins with B, Becky. What I'm going to do is go, oh, this one's ball. What can you hear? B, ball. What am I doing? I'm modelling it. I'm making it really clear, knowing what your challenges are, and I'm helping store up here the sounds that are associated with this word. Let's put it in the B box. Oh yeah, lovely. B, ball. You have a go? B, lovely, brilliant. Oh, got sock. What can you hear? Sock. So I'm doing all the teaching, all of the showing. It goes in this one. So they're doing supporting all of that learning. I Spy is another nice game in terms of working with sounds, and I would start off with two things on the table. One might be ball, one might be sock. Okay, well, let's try something beginning with. So which one is it? What can you hear? Sock. Which one is it? Sock. Brilliant. I might even have the picture cards with the words written underneath and some magnetic letters from my it's like the older ones. Which one is it? Let's match it on. I'm really trying to visually support that thing I know that you find really tricky. And then finally, there's just a video talking about aura motor skills. So things like lip rounding for things like blowing bubbles, and talks about possible links between aura motor and speech, but really is saying we want to be doing lots of speech work right from the very beginning. So there's some resources around speech. You'll see we've got the sound cards there. One thing that comes up quite often is that people will say, oh, Becky, I spoke to my nursery. Might be a parent says, I spoke to my nursery, and they say they're not doing phonics until they're in the last year, until they go to school. I want to be very clear, this is not phonics. These are sound cards for practicing listening and producing sounds and words. That's our aim. They do have the letters on there. One, to make sure that the adults know what sounds they are producing, and two, our children have, having talked about the difficulties with verbal short-term memory, we actually have strengths in visual short-term memory, and often we will start to learn those letters. So they're on there anyway, but certainly that's not the aim of the game. The aim is listening to sounds, developing that sound system, and producing sounds. Because of that, there's a whole activity sheet that comes with the resources and is downloadable to talk through all of those activities. Okay, and so finally under the language section, this section is kind of broken down into two sections really. One is vocabulary, which is single words, and that will be the single words that your child understands, their receptive vocabulary, or the single words that your child is able to produce, be their expressive vocabulary, whether it's through spoken words or signs, or they might be using some kind of assisted device. What we know is our children need more repetitions to learn words, so we know lots and lots of repetition, and it can be really useful to keep a diary or a record sheet to just tick off the words that the child understands, and then later on the words that your child is able to produce in support of setting some targets. You might think, let's say just started nursery, let's choose some useful words from around the room, things that they're going to probably do regularly, things like what does snack mean, what does peg mean if they're going to hang their coat up, what does sand tray mean, and you would do some work on, and then can they show you the picture? If you say where's the sand tray from a choice, and they can choose it consistently, we know that they know that, although they're not able to say that yet, and then later on it may well become a target. So it's useful to choose target words then that you know that they're not yet understanding that would be useful, and then later on choosing from that use for the words they already understand as expressive vocabulary targets. When you're choosing targets, you want to think of not just nouns, which are obviously those objects, people that are easy to represent in a picture, but also it's really important that we have these verbs, these action words, and other words like adjectives and prepositions as well. Because you need a range of words to then be able to work on combining words. And again, our children will often have a strength in terms of receptive, we call combining words syntax often, have a receptive syntax strength, so they'll understand. If you said, oh, where's the red ball? And you've got the red ball and the blue ball and the red bear, but they might not be able to say any words yet. So often our targets may be quite different in terms of understanding and in terms of expression. Combining words is a particular challenge for children with Down syndrome, and we have difficulty with some of those smaller grammatical words and grammatical morphemes, things I put on their functional words like the and a and to and for. Oh, that sounds like numbers. I went to the park, or I went for an ice cream. That's not a very good example, but anyway. Plural and possessive s, so one duck, two ducks, mummy, mummies. Tense markers, difference between jump, jumping, jumps, jumped. And as you can probably hear as I'm saying them, those words are all the words that we don't stress in sentences, all the sounds that we don't stress in those words. They are obviously then going to be harder to hear and hold on to and remember, so it's easy to see why they're more of a challenge. But knowing that, there is a load of activities to do under vocabulary and language. So there's a video talks lots more in detail about keeping a record and choosing targets. Talks about setting the environment. Once you've got your targets, if you know you're working on jungle animals, or you know you're working on colours, then thinking about any time you can get those into the activity that you're doing, hiding the jungle animals in the sand, or making footprints with them in the paint. Oh, I can name that animal. I'm going to get lots and lots of practice getting out an animal book to read. There is a video talking about singing. Anybody who will know me will know that I'm not a huge singer, and certainly not in the groups. It talks a little bit about the benefits in terms of repetition, but also in terms of making those words and that vocabulary real and meaningful in songs. So if I'm doing Old MacDonald Has a Farm, I'm going to have my set of farm animals. What does he have? You choose one. Oh, it's the horse. Let's all sign horse. Let's all try and say and make the sound of a horse. Here it is. And then we'll move on with the song. There's a video talking about range of words. As I said, we need more than just nouns. Really important that we're working on those verbs as well, and then adjectives and prepositions. First one talks all about object and picture matching. I shall say a little bit more about that in a second. And the second one talks about personal books. And these are photo books for the child, often of things that are from their real world that focus around that vocabulary. So let's say we're doing different sorts of activities within the preschool setting. You may well have a personal book that says my preschool room or elephant room or whatever it is. And in there, you just got pictures of the different things that I can sit and go through. It's a nice conversation tool, conversation support. I can take home, I can show other people and get lots and lots of repetition of hearing those things. Might be that I'm working on colours, or might be working on plurals, but you'd have that target vocabulary within your book. Nice little bit of structured repetition. There's a video talking about the use of print. I've mentioned the use of print a few times in terms of having the written word there. I'm always keen to have the written word there right from the very beginning. As I've said, it really supports the adults to all say the same thing. So if there's a picture of a cup of milk, are people saying milk? Are people saying cup? Are people saying drink? Are people saying juice? It could be anything. So I really like to have that vocabulary there. And then as the children get a bit older, they don't learn to, point to that and I say something, even if I can't read it. But I understand how print works. So it has lots and lots of value. And then may well start to bring in some written words to support language, because that can be a real strength for children with Down syndrome. Talks about different categories, so choosing vocabulary from different categories and learning category vocabulary like animals, furniture, clothes, etc. Talks about new settings and preparing children for new settings, thinking about what vocabulary is going to come up. If you're thinking about if you've got a child who's going to school in September, we'll give you to Easter, but then it's worth starting to think about what's going to be really useful in terms of getting on there. And there's a video about the use of sign. Lots of children, certainly in the UK, introduced to signing in those preschool years, and talks about some strategies for supporting that. In terms of combining words, Similarly, keeping a record and choosing targets, and it goes back to looking at your individual words and making sure you've got that range of words that's needed. You might need to target some new vocabulary words, and then thinking about the different structures that may be forming your targets. Talks about 2-word phrases, so putting 2 words together, putting 3 words together, whether it's in terms of receptive following instructions or the child producing some of these word combinations. And again, that may be very, very different. You might be targeting a child understanding 3 keyword phrases. Where's the big or little, red or yellow, blue, ball or car? Child themselves maybe just working on single word production, so you may have some quite different targets. The importance of modelling phrases, encouraging children to have a go at repeating, including some of that grammar. Talks about barrier games, where 2 people, whoever it is, have the same set of items. You have a barrier in between you, like a book, and then you choose one. You say, oh, I've got the cup, and can you find the same? So you've got to do some listening. Let's see. Brilliant. Oh, working on receptive. You may have, oh, have you got the big yellow duck? Yep, brilliant. And then, of course, it can be the child's turn. How are they going to communicate that? Maybe choosing a picture, maybe starting to say some single words, maybe different and different levels. Personal books, bringing in those, putting words together. So if we're doing, let's say we're doing 2 keyword phrases with colours, you have your My Colour book, and you'll have the blue sock and the red sock and the blue car and the red car. And so I've got a nice bit of structured practice in there. And then there's a video that talks just about that kind of early grammar and supporting the use of, really in this preschool stage, it's normally and the is a good one to be working on, and then thinking about some of those early endings like plural s and that ing progressive marker. There's some examples of resources. I said about the picture matching I would come back to. Picture matching is a great way of using the children's visual learning strength. So I'd say, well, this is a, whatever it might be, aeroplane. Can you find the plane? Where's the same plane? To start with, all of this is about teaching. So I'll be saying, oh, where's this one here? Can you put it on with me? Great, tap, tap, tap. Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. So I'm showing them until I think actually they're starting to get the game. And then I can go, oh, let me hold up 2. Where is the bus? Are you looking? Can you point? Can you take it? I know you're starting to be able to show me what it is you understand. There's some adjective cards there for working on big and little. I think the important point just to raise there is you can see the only thing different about those cards is the size, and that's important when you're working on things like adjectives. So it's not a big Alsatian and a little Jack Russell, because they're going to be different in lots of different ways. It is one big and one little. There's a information sheet all about use of print and personal books to give a bit of extra support around there. And there's just an example of a social story in terms of toileting, which are in there. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say, you may well be going, oh my goodness, there was so much information there. There is so much information in EYDP. We've just talked about speech and language. We haven't talked about learning, play, literacy, numeracy, early number, early reading, behaviour, health. All of those things are in there. What I would suggest is thinking about, okay, what's going to be relevant in terms of setting some targets for the child that I'm working with across communication. What communication supports have they got? What could I bring in? Can I think of one speech activity that's going to help in terms of listening or production, and one language target, whether it's vocabulary, single words, or it might be that the child you're working with is at that putting words together. But having 3 different targets across those throughout the year that you're going to update would be fantastic. And then, of course, you can come back to the early years development programme. Annual subscription, I said, I've talked about information from experts in their field at the beginning. Loads of videos, downloaded resources, as well as your pack, and that opportunity to keep coming back and asking questions if you're not sure. If you think, oh, my child's doing this and this in speech, where should I go to next? Those drop-in sessions are available. It's £200 for the year, and that includes that kit. Just to mention disability access funding, which is specific to England. but from September 2024, it's expanded to children from aged 9 months who are in receipt of DLA. Now, that is probably the majority of children with Down syndrome. It might be that parents haven't applied for DLA or haven't been successful with DLA, and they might need a bit of support around that. But certainly then, once they have, the setting can access an extra £910 each year to be spent on supporting the child's additional needs. So we would say EYDP might be a great use of some of those funds. And there is some access, you can access information about the DAF funding. I've included the links, so I'll send that round with the handout. We've also got links to the Early Years Development Programme. We do early development groups for parents. So if you're thinking, oh, where can I signpost parents to? There are online groups where they get videos of activities to do each month, and they get the opportunity to meet as a group with one of our education development advisors to help support kind of how to make things a little bit trickier, how to make things a little bit easier, and just general support in those groups. And then do loads of sessions like this on so many different topics. It's unbelievable, really. So keep an eye on there for other things that might be of interest. The other thing that might be useful for preschool parents, you might want to signpost them to, is if they are having some challenges around behaviour. We do a behaviour boot camp that's an online 4 sessions they can access, and similarly we do a toilet training boot camp which parents can access to get that support for toilet training. And I have to say, World Down Syndrome Day is coming up, 21st of March. You can order your sunflower pack, which is a way of kind of raising awareness, thinking about inclusion and differences in your setting. And also we have a load of free to download resources across lots of different year groups, but thinking about obviously early years, activities that you can freely download that may be useful in your setting to help raise that, that awareness.